The golf cart rolled up silently, bringing with it a rage that splintered my window and threatened my life. They had no idea who I really was, or the powerful secret I was protecting. The air in my unmarked sedan was thick with the scent of pine and privilege. I was parked on a quiet, curved street in an exclusive gated community, the kind of place where the manicured lawns looked like they were cut with scissors, and the sprinklers whispered secrets to each other across acres of perfect green. My target residence was 3 houses down, a sprawling beige McMansion with a slate roof. Surveillance is 90% boredom and 10% sheer terror. And for the last 4 hours, I'd been firmly in the boredom camp. My job was simple: observe, report, and stay invisible. I was so focused on the house, mapping the movements of the domestic staff, and timing the private security patrols, that I didn't notice the golf cart until it was right alongside my window. It had silently rolled up on its electric motor, a predator in its natural habitat. The man behind the wheel was a caricature of suburban authority. He wore a crisp, white polo shirt with the community's logo embroidered on the chest, khaki shorts, and a face that seemed permanently pinched in a scowl. A sun-bleached golf visor did little to hide the suspicion in his pale blue eyes. In the passenger seat of the cart, nestled in a bag, was a full set of gleaming irons and woods. He killed the motor and leaned over, tapping on my window with a thick, meaty knuckle. I lowered it a few inches, the meticulously conditioned air of my car mixing with the humid afternoon. "You lost, pal?" he asked. His voice was a low growl, the kind of tone that isn't asking a question but making a statement. His eyes did a slow, deliberate crawl over my face, my clothes, the leather of my car seats. I'm a black man in a high-end vehicle in a neighborhood where the only other black faces I'd seen were wearing uniforms of a different sort. Landscapers, nannies, delivery drivers. I knew exactly what this was. "Just enjoying the view," I said, keeping my voice even and calm. My hands stayed where he could see them, resting on the steering wheel. "This is a private community," he grunted, his gaze hardening. "Not a scenic overlook. Folks around here get nervous when they see unfamiliar vehicles just sitting around." The slight pause he took before unfamiliar vehicles was loaded with meaning. "I'm not causing any trouble," I replied. My mission was sensitive. The man I was assigned to protect was arriving in 2 days, and the last thing I needed was to create a local incident report that might flag our presence. Blowing my cover over a power-tripping security guard was not an option. He wasn't satisfied. He got out of the cart, and my internal alarm bells started ringing. He was a big guy, with a paunch that strained the buttons of his polo, but he moved with a certain confidence. He reached into the golf bag and pulled out a 9-iron, gripping it like a nightstick. He walked around to the front of my car, pretending to read my license plate, all while tapping the head of the club against his open palm. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The soft rhythmic impact was a drumbeat counting down to something ugly. "I'm going to need to see some ID," he said, his voice louder now, more authoritative. "And I'm going to need you to tell me exactly what your business is here." This was the crossroads. I couldn't show him my real ID. It would compromise everything. I had a cover ID, a driver's license that identified me as a real estate consultant, but something told me this guy wasn't going to be satisfied with that. He wasn't looking for an explanation. He was looking for a confrontation. "Look," I started, trying to de-escalate one last time. "I'm just waiting for a client. I can move along if I'm making you uncomfortable." "You're making the residents uncomfortable," he spat back, taking a step closer to my driver's side door. The 9-iron was no longer tapping his palm. He was holding it now in a 2-handed grip, like he was about to take a swing. "Now let me see that ID, or I'm calling the county sheriff and having you dragged out of here for trespassing." My training screamed at me. Threat. Neutralize. Survive. But my mission parameters screamed louder. Observe. Do not engage. Do not compromise the operation. I made a split-second decision. I'd give him the cover ID. It was a risk, but it was better than the alternative. All right. Take it easy," I said, raising my left hand in a placating gesture. "It's in my wallet. I'm reaching for it now." Slowly. I moved my right hand, telegraphing the motion, dipping it into my inner jacket pocket where I kept my wallet. But his eyes weren't on my hand. They were on my face, filled with a cocktail of rage and righteousness. He saw my movement not as compliance, but as defiance. Maybe he thought I was reaching for a weapon. Maybe he just didn't care. The world exploded in a shower of shattered glass. The 9-iron came down with incredible force, obliterating my passenger side window. Shards of safety glass sprayed across the interior of the car, peppering my face and arms. The sound was like a thunderclap inside the confined space, leaving my ears ringing. For a heartbeat, I was stunned. He'd actually done it. Before I could even process the first attack, he was moving. He rounded the hood of my car, his face a mask of pure rage. He wasn't stopping. He wasn't waiting for the police. He was coming to finish it himself. He raised the club again, this time aiming for me. My mission, my cover, my orders, they all evaporated in a flash of adrenaline and self-preservation. This wasn't about the job anymore. This was about survival. He yanked on my door handle, but the car was still locked. He roared in frustration and drew the club back for a swing at my window, the one right next to my head. I had no other choice. Compromise the mission or end up in a morgue. The decision was made. As he pulled the club back, I hit the unlock button and kicked the door outward, smashing it into his legs. He stumbled back, surprised but not deterred. He ripped the door fully open, his face just inches from mine, the golf club raised high for a final, decisive swing. And that's when his eyes locked onto the seal of the United States Secret Service, on the credentials in my left hand, and the muzzle of the Sig Sauer P229 pointed directly at his chest from my right. For a long moment the world was silent except for the frantic ringing in my ears and the soft whisper of the sprinklers next door. The man's face, which had been a mask of contorted rage, seemed to melt. The color drained from it, leaving a pasty, slack-jawed caricature of the aggressor who had stood there a second before. His knuckles were white on the grip of the 9-iron. Then, as his brain finally connected the image of the seal and the gun with the reality of his situation, his fingers went limp. The golf club clattered onto the pristine asphalt with a sound that seemed ridiculously loud in the quiet street. His eyes, wide with terror, flicked from my face to the muzzle of my Sig, then to the gold-embossed credentials in my other hand. The words, United States Secret Service, were unmistakable. "Federal agent," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the steel in my hand. "On your knees. Now." My training had taken over completely. The anger, the humiliation, the sting of glass on my skin, it was all packed away into a neat little box in the back of my mind. In this moment he wasn't a racist bully. He was a hostile subject who had just committed assault on a federal officer. He was a threat to be neutralized. He didn't move. He was frozen, a statue of stupid mistakes. I said, "On your knees." My voice cracked through the suburban tranquility like a gunshot. "Hands laced behind your head. Do it now or I will put you down." That got him moving. He stumbled backward, his legs clumsy, and dropped to his knees on the hot pavement. His khaki shorts would be filthy, but I figured that was the least of his problems. He laced his thick fingers behind his head, his whole body trembling. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. I'm an off-duty cop. County Sheriff's Department. I thought you were a burglar." An off-duty cop. Of course he was. It explained the unearned confidence, the immediate escalation to violence. He wasn't just some power-tripping security guard. He was a man used to wielding authority who couldn't stomach seeing me in his neighborhood. I kept my weapon trained on his center mass. "You thought a burglar sits in a late-model sedan in broad daylight. You assaulted me, destroyed my vehicle, and threatened my life. Your thoughts don't matter right now. Shut your mouth." I reached for my radio with my left hand, never taking my eyes or my gun off him. I needed to call this in. To my supervisor, to our local field office. This was now a compromised operation. The scene was contaminated. Just as I was about to key the mic, I heard it. A distant but rapidly approaching siren. My blood ran cold. He called it in before he came at me. He must have. He was planning on having backup to watch him drag me out of the car. And now they were arriving to a scene that looked, to the untrained eye, like the exact opposite of what it was. A black man holding a gun on a white cop. 2 county sheriff cruisers came screaming around the corner, tires squealing as they fishtailed to a stop, boxing my sedan in. Doors flew open and 2 uniformed officers took cover behind their vehicles, their own service weapons drawn and pointed directly at me. "Drop the weapon! Get on the ground! Now!" one of them bellowed through a loudspeaker. I remained still, my gun still trained on the kneeling man. Dropping my weapon wasn't an option. Not yet. Not while the original threat was still unsecured. "I am a federal agent," I yelled back, my voice strained. "This man assaulted me. My credentials are in my left hand. I don't care who you are. Drop your weapon. Last chance." The kneeling cop, the man who had caused all of this, saw his chance. A flicker of his old arrogance returned to his eyes. "He's lying," he screamed at his buddies. "He's the one who attacked me. Help me." The 2 officers exchanged a look. I saw the calculation in their eyes, the snap judgment being made. They saw one of their own, a white man in khakis, on his knees. And they saw me, a black man in a suit, holding a gun. Their choice was already made. Their barrels steadied, fingers tightening on their triggers. I was caught in an impossible triangle of flashing lights, drawn weapons, and ingrained prejudice. My SIG was pointed at the man who tried to cave my skull in, and 2 other guns were pointed at me, ready to finish the job for him. The world narrowed to the sights of my pistol, and the 2 barrels pointed back at me. It was a standoff born of assumption and prejudice, a deadly equation I had a few seconds to solve. Dropping my weapon meant trusting my life to men who had already judged me guilty. Keeping it raised meant they would almost certainly open fire. "Badge number 7 for ye," the kneeling cop shrieked, playing his trump card. "I'm Deputy Frank Miller. He pulled a gun on me." My mind was racing, sifting through protocols, tactical options, survival instincts. There was only one move left. It was a Hail Mary, a complete violation of every rule about maintaining a low profile, but my life was on the line. "Secret Service," I roared, pitching my voice to carry over the sirens. "Supervisory Special Agent Reed, my principal is the Secretary of the Treasury. This is a PPD, a presidentially protected detail. This location is now under federal jurisdiction. Stand down or you will be charged with obstructing a federal operation." The silence that followed was deafening. The 2 officers froze, their fingers hovering over their triggers. The words "Secret Service" and "Secretary of the Treasury" hung in the air like a physical barrier. Cops understand chain of command. They understand jurisdiction. And the Secret Service trumps a county sheriff every day of the week. One of the officers, the younger one, cautiously lowered his weapon a few inches and reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, we have a man on scene claiming to be Secret Service, advising this is a federal detail." Deputy Miller's face fell. The cavalry hadn't ridden in to save him. They'd just been told they were trespassing on federal ground. The arrogance that had briefly returned to his eyes was replaced by the dawning, horrific realization of just how badly he had screwed up. Within minutes, the street was swarming. Black SUVs with government plates materialized out of nowhere, my team responding to the chaos. Men and women in dark suits and earpieces emerged, creating a perimeter, their professionalism a stark contrast to the sloppy aggression of the county cops. My direct supervisor, a stoic man named Carlson, strode onto the scene, his face like thunder. He took in the scene in an instant. My shattered window, the golf club on the pavement, the kneeling deputy, and the 2 baffled local cops. He walked over to me, his eyes scanning me for injuries. "Agent Reed, are you harmed?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Negative, sir." "Subject is secured," I replied, finally lowering my weapon as 2 of my fellow agents took over, cuffing a now whimpering Deputy Miller. Carlson turned to the senior county officer. "Your deputy has just assaulted a federal officer, interfered with a protective detail for the 4th person in the line of presidential succession, and nearly created a blue-on-blue incident that would have made national headlines. Your department has a very big problem." The officer looked like he wanted the manicured lawn to open up and swallow him whole. The aftermath was a blur of paperwork, formal statements, and quiet fury from my superiors. The secretary's visit was postponed, the entire operation compromised because one man couldn't stand the sight of my skin color in his perfect little world. I saw Frank Miller one last time, a week later. He wasn't in his crisp polo shirt anymore. He was in a rumpled suit, sitting across a polished table in the U.S. Attorney's office. His lawyer was whispering frantically in his ear, but Miller wasn't listening. He just stared at me, his face a hollow mask of regret. He was stripped of his badge, facing federal charges, his career and reputation in ashes. He had swung his golf club like a king in his castle, only to find out he'd tried to take a swing at the entire United States government. I was reassigned to a different detail, far from that quiet, privileged street. But sometimes, when I'm on a boring stretch of surveillance, I think about him. I think about the moment his rage-filled eyes saw my credentials and the cold steel of my pistol. It wasn't justice that stopped him. It wasn't a sudden recognition of my humanity. It was the sudden, shocking realization that I had more power than he did. He didn't stop because he realized he was attacking a man. He stopped because he realized he was attacking an agent. And in this country, for a man who looks like me, sometimes that's the only thing that makes a difference.